When Concorde broke the rule, it became the legendary story of the rise, challenges and fall of the supersonic dream that changed aviation forever. In the history of aviation, there are, a few aircraft that stand apart not simply as machines, but as icons that defined an era and symbolized what humanity could achieve when it dared to dream. And among these, none is as unforgettable as Concorde, the supersonic passenger jet that was once the fastest way to cross the Atlantic. Breaking every rule of ordinary air travel, Concorde was sleek, sharp and, dazzling. It was a creation born out of rivalry, ambition and technological audacity. It came into existence during a period when the world was obsessed with speed and with the belief that the future of flight had no limits. Concorde was never just about flying from one city to another. It was about breaking barriers both literally and symbolically, for it flew faster than sound and carried ordinary passengers into a realm of travel once reserved for fighter pilots and astronauts. The story of Concorde began in the 1950s and 1960s, when nations were competing in a Cold War atmosphere where technological prestige meant global influence. Both France and Britain sought to prove themselves leaders in aviation, and together they embarked on the ambitious plan to create a supersonic airliner. The idea was simple yet revolutionary. While traditional jets carried people across oceans in 7 or 8 hours, Concorde would cut that time in half. It promised to carry travellers from London to New York in barely over 3 hours, at speeds touching Mach 2, twice the speed of sound. The dream was, honestly, intoxicating, and for engineers, it was a once-in-a-lifetime challenge. Yet even from its early days, Concorde was breaking the rules. It was incredibly costly, it was politically controversial, and it forced science to stretch to the very edge of what was possible in civil aviation. Building Concorde meant facing enormous challenges. The design itself was unlike any other airliner. Its slender fuselage and delta wings were necessary to handle the stresses of supersonic flight. But this gave it a shape that looked, strange compared to the wide-bodied jets then entering service. Its nose famously drooped downward during takeoff and landing so pilots could see the runway, while during flight it lifted up to form a sleek aerodynamic spear. The plane itself grew so hot while flying at Mach 2 that the fuselage expanded several inches in length from thermal stress. The windows were smaller, the cabin narrower, and the engines, frankly, deafening. Yet, despite these limitations, it was a triumph of engineering. Concorde represented the belief that humanity could bend nature to its will. When Concorde entered service in the mid-1970s, it was, nothing short of a sensation. The jet flew for British Airways and Air France, and it carried celebrities, royalty, business leaders, and honestly, anyone who could afford the breathtaking ticket price. To fly on Concorde was not simply to travel. It was to experience the very cutting edge of human achievement. Imagine a glass of champagne at takeoff, lunch in London, and then dinner in New York. It was, quite simply, the ultimate luxury in motion. The aircraft symbolized glamour and exclusivity, and it gave passengers a sense of superiority, as if they were riding in a spacecraft while the rest of the world crawled along below in slower, subsonic jets. Concorde broke the rule that travel had to be slow and tedious. It promised a world where the distances between continents shrank into the span of an afternoon. But Concorde's life was not without its obstacles. The first major rule it broke was the one of sound itself, because every time it crossed the speed of sound, it created a thunderous sonic boom that could shatter windows and terrify communities on the ground. This made it impossible for Concorde to fly supersonic over land, so its routes were, mostly limited to transatlantic flights, where the sonic boom dissipated harmlessly over the ocean. Then there was the matter of economics. Concorde was breathtakingly expensive to operate. Its engines guzzled fuel at an astonishing rate, and its maintenance costs were massive. Airlines that had once lined up to buy it gradually withdrew, leaving only the two national carriers of Britain and France operating the aircraft in limited numbers. In a world growing more conscious of fuel efficiency and environmental costs, Concorde looked like an extravagant rule breaker. an aircraft that defied the logic of sensible economics. Yet, for all these challenges, Concorde endured because it was loved and admired by those who flew on it, and even by those who simply dreamed of it in the sky. It became a moving landmark. When people heard the thunderous roar of its takeoff or saw its sharp profile streaking across the horizon, they felt they were witnessing something extraordinary. Concorde was a reminder of the optimism of the 20th century, of a time when speed and technological prowess seemed to promise endless possibility. The fall of Concorde, however, was as dramatic as its rise. The aircraft had always been vulnerable because of its limited numbers and its high costs, but the final blow came in the year 2000, when Air France Flight 4590 crashed shortly after takeoff from Paris, killing all on board. It was the only fatal crash in Concorde's long history, but it destroyed public confidence and revealed how fragile its legacy had become. Combined with the economic downturn of the early 2000s and the sharp decline in travel following the September 11th attacks, Concorde was no longer viable to maintain. In 2003, both Air France and British Airways retired their Concorde fleets, bringing an end to the era of supersonic passenger travel. The retirement of Concorde was mourned by millions across the globe. When its final flights landed, people wept. Aviation enthusiasts lined runways, and cameras captured the last glimpses of the silver bird that had once ruled the skies. It felt as if humanity had taken a step backward, as if the future promised by Concorde had been cut short too soon. No other supersonic passenger aircraft has ever taken its place, and today all commercial jets still travel at subsonic speeds as they did before Concorde arrived. Looking back, Concorde remains both a triumph and a cautionary tale. It was a triumph because it proved what was technically possible. It showed that passengers could cross oceans at supersonic speeds in comfort and style. It was a cautionary tale because it revealed the limits of ambition when confronted with economics, environmental challenges, and practical necessity. In the end, Concorde broke too many rules. It defied the rule of noise, the rule of fuel efficiency, the rule of affordability, and finally, the rule of safety. Even so, its legacy endures not as a failure, but as a dream that humanity once pursued with boldness and brilliance. Today, when people remember Concorde, they do not simply recall an airplane. They recall an age when flying felt magical, when engineering dared to reach the edge of science, and when for a fleeting moment the future of flight was faster than sound. Concorde may no longer thunder across the Atlantic, but it lives on in memory as one of the greatest achievements in aviation history. The jet that broke the rules and in doing so, captured the imagination of the world.